Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Barbara Tyran, the president of the Women's Council on Energy and the Environment, and I'm delighted you have all joined WCEE's virtual executive exchange. Today's guest is Lauren Faber O'Connor, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Los Angeles. Lauren is responsible for driving the implementation of Los Angeles's Green New Deal, a global model for local action to confront climate change. She also works to build collaboration at the international level through C40, a network of 97 of the world's megacities, which is chaired by Mayor Garcetti at the national level, and through Climate Mayors, an organization co-founded by the mayor. This demonstrates United States leadership also on climate change issues. As always, this program is intended for all of you, so please do use your Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask Lauren any questions at any time. We want this program to be as interactive as possible. And while you're thinking of those questions, I'm going to begin and get a few of them started. So first, I want to welcome Lauren. Lauren, great to have you joining us here at WCEE. And congratulations on your recent award through the Public Utilities Fortnightly magazine for being a magnificent under 40s participant on energy and environmental issues. And also congratulations on your new LA 100 study. Can you talk a little bit about the LA 100 study and what that means?
Absolutely, Barbara, and thank you so much for inviting me. And it's so wonderful to see you again, and just, the amazing things you're doing for WCEE. When I, came out of college and, got to meet you as an alum of Stanford, and the work that you're doing in this sector in Washington, D.C., just have always really looked up to you and have been a mentor, and seeing that you're a mentor to so many others is just really wonderful. So thank you for including me. Thanks for asking about LA 100. So I've been with the mayor now for 6 years, and, it was an amazing opportunity for me to come back to my hometown of Los Angeles to work on sustainability issues, and sustainability really broadly defined in terms of how the mayor thinks about not just conventional environmental issues, though my career has been in really energy and environment broadly, climate policy, energy policy, transportation policy, but really how those are all combined into your everyday life in a city, whether that's how you get around, where you live, what you eat, all of these things, the job opportunities that you have, those are all intertwined in our work. When I first came to the job in 2015, within a few months, we experienced what probably many of you had heard about at the end of October 2015, which was the Aliso Canyon natural gas blowout right outside of the city boundaries. And this was really, I think, a fundamental sort of shift in the public, in an understanding of the energy system in Los Angeles, and an understanding of the energy system in California, and really the role of local residents in our own energy system. And, coming into this role where the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is the largest municipal utility in the country. So it's a municipally owned electricity and water utility, largest in the country, servicing 4 million residents, 1 million customers, really looking at what the power of that utility is. And for those of you who are familiar with energy policy, electricity policy, and maybe familiar with California because of some of its uniqueness, but most of the investor-owned utilities are, they're deregulated. They're no longer kind of what's called vertically integrated. They don't necessarily own and operate the power, own and operate the poles and wires, operate the grid, and service the customer. DWP, on the other hand, it still does all of that. So as we call it, soup to nuts. We run the grid for Los Angeles, so we are not part of the California grid. And we own and operate, build our own generation resources as well as the poles and wires that get to the customers, and then of course being the service delivery to customers. And so our ability to transition the energy system, our electricity system, is really something that can be a model for any utility, any state grid operator, anyone. And so I kind of, in coming to realize that, took it really seriously to look at the impact that something like the Aliso Canyon gas blowout was having on communities, also the peril that it was putting the energy system in, the reliability of the energy system in Southern California broadly, and really looking at, okay, we need to double down on our efforts to get to pursue really 100% renewable energy. And thus was born the idea of our 100% renewable energy goals. The state was in the middle of going through a 50% RPS transition through legislation in Sacramento. But essentially, I sought out expertise from the Department of Energy, and particularly the National Renewable Energy Lab, who jumped at the chance to be able to work with us. And DWP, to their credit, was a very willing partner and put up the resources for this, what ended up being this incredible multi-year, 3.5-year study, the most comprehensive of its kind, doesn't exist anywhere else, to look at a grid as complicated as Los Angeles, to look at not just the energy generation, but also the impact of our electrification goals with transportation and buildings, to look at what are the air quality impacts, the jobs impacts, the equity impacts. All of these things were brought into this study, obviously using NREL's supercomputing, amazing work. They like to talk about the 100 million simulations that they ran, as well as a really integral piece was our advisory group, was an advisory group of different perspectives, from large customers to labor to folks that are focused on costs and ratepayer needs, environmental groups, environmental justice groups, so on and so forth, really coming together. And cut to just in March, when the report was released, shows that for Los Angeles, for a grid like Los Angeles, 100% renewable energy is achievable, it is reliable, and it is affordable. And there are some decisions that are unique depending on what we want to do with a timeline, or what some of our priorities are, but some of it is just the same no matter where you want to go. Is we can run the grid on 70 to 80% wind and solar. We have to really maximize everything in terms of distributed generation, in terms of all the resources that we have. And then there's opportunity for innovation on the edges, like looking at green hydrogen, for example, for in-basin generation, long duration. But anyway, it was a huge learning experience. It was a huge community-oriented experience. And I think it was really important to advancing science and innovation nationally and globally, because now this is something that the federal government is looking at taking to other cities, to other states, nationally and globally. So something to be really proud of, because it also allowed us to announce a 10-year acceleration of our zero carbon grid goals to 2035, matching the president's commitment.
Thank you. Thank you. That's exciting news. Can you talk a little bit about how it ties into the Green New Deal that I mentioned in the introduction?
Sure. So, another reason why taking the job with Mayor Garcetti was so exciting to me was it was really, again, born and raised Angelina, but I'd never worked in Los Angeles, because I never thought that I would have a thriving career on the issues I was most passionate about in a city like LA. Growing up is the impression that I had. And so I was in New York, in Washington, DC, in Sacramento, in San Francisco, and really coming back to LA more often in those latter parts of my most recent career prior to coming into this job, was seeing how much of that kind of ethos, economic opportunity, community was changing in LA. And so when Mayor Garcetti was elected in 2013, one of the first things he had done after decades in the city council championing environmental issues, was set up a sustainability office and put together the very first sustainable city plan for Los Angeles. And he said we have to update it every 4 years. And so we thought, 4 years, we've got time. And I got to tell you, time flies. And what had happened in those intervening 4 years was really transformational in terms of it not just being a 4-year update to our plan, but really needing to look at the urgency of climate change. We had the IPCC report coming out saying we have the time 12 years to the end of this decade that we're in now to avoid catastrophic climate change, seeing the political winds changing, seeing the technology changing so rapidly. We really had a shift of accelerated action that we called LA's Green New Deal, because in particular in the 2018-2019 timeframe, we saw in Washington, D.C., the debates going on around comprehensive climate action. What is the Green New Deal? And the mayor thought, I really want to help define it, to offer a model, to look at the West Coast as to what's going on as a model for ambitious, accelerated action that prioritizes equity and frontline communities in both process of developing policy and implementation in terms of who benefits from the outcomes of our policies, and really looking at the impact that those policies are having on our economy and on the changes of our economy in terms of the workforce needs and the workforce changes, as well as what are we doing within our own city powers to lead by example. And that's what LA's Green New Deal is all about.
Great. That's very helpful background. And then I know the mayor and you are very active in the other organizations I mentioned, C40 and Climate Mayors. So can you talk a little bit about how that all comes together?
Absolutely. Two really critical organizations that we work with, critical from a kind of race to the top perspective, as well as real learnings between each other. So Climate Mayors was created actually under during the Obama administration, when there was a task force of state and local and tribal leaders, and Mayor Garcetti was appointed to that White House task force alongside a few other mayors, then Mayor of Philadelphia and Mayor of Houston, got together and said, we really could use talking to each other more at like the peer-to-peer level on climate change. And then thus was born this work of Climate Mayors, which started out pretty technical, looking at really how do we give the Obama administration kind of further wind at their backs on, comprehensive climate legislation at the federal level, getting ready to ink the Paris Agreement. We really wanted to demonstrate significant support in the cities and residents of those cities. But I have to say that when there was a transition of administrations and the Trump administration came in and said that we're going to pull out of the Paris Agreement, that really did shift Climate Mayors literally overnight, if not quicker than that. Overnight, the membership of Climate Mayors doubled. And this was because when that statement was made, Mayor Garcetti, as much as we wanted to kind of cry in a corner and get really, really angry about what was going on, he got on the phone and was reaching out to colleagues and saying, we can't let this stand, and we have to demonstrate both domestically and abroad that the US is not turning its back on the Paris Agreement. And Climate Mayors doubled, and then within the end of the week, quadrupled. There was this organic campaign going on of, is your mayor a climate mayor? Does your mayor support the Paris Agreement? And it was really this incredible galvanizing moment where mayors were realizing the important voice that they have in demonstrating support and implementing climate action in their communities on behalf of their communities. So we grew from about 60 to almost 500 where we are right now, in 48 out of 50 states. I'll let you maybe guess some of the states that are the two, but they're north and souths of each other. And so it's really been an incredible way to offer that peer-to-peer galvanization and mobilization of US mayors taking action. And then C40 is kind of the mirror of climate mayors internationally, with a couple of differences. It's a much smaller group of the largest cities, and there's a level of accountability for action and involvement with these cities in C40 that really demonstrates, as I say, this race to the top on climate action, where we're really learning from each other, the best work from around the world, from London, from Paris, from Oslo, from Santiago, all over the Mexico City, things that are happening, Melbourne, a lot of incredible action taking place, of Jakarta, who the mayor is engaging with on a regular personal basis. This is not a ceremonial post, the chair of this organization. It's a very working, roll up your sleeves, personally engaged, me personally engaged, incredible opportunity to be leading and formulating the platform for the world's cities to be working on climate change. And just quickly to say, his platform has really been about a global Green New Deal, this global coalition of ambition and urgency, as seen through, delivering very specific actions in transportation, in buildings, in supply chains, in climate adaptation affecting the global South the most, and the needs of the global South cities, making sure those are prioritized as well. And that's been a lot of how he's directed the work of C40 in his chairmanship.
Good, thank you. That's a very helpful background. You mentioned some of the past presidential transitions, and certainly this is an important week as President Biden begins his first international trip. So we're seeing a lot of headlines around that. My question is, how have you seen the new Biden-Harris administration altering the U.S. relationships in C40 with the international community, or is it still too soon to see that?
I would say we've seen a very immediate shift, that actually the new administration came in eyes wide open and arms open to cities domestically and internationally, very, very humbly and openly recognizing, and you saw this in the climate summit that President Biden hosted, in his first 100 days, very openly recognizing the work that cities and states have been undertaking, both when there is motivated leadership at the federal level, and certainly when there is not motivated leadership at the federal level on climate action. And that, but for that action, the US and the world, in terms of actual progress on climate and reducing emissions, would be in a really dire place. And we still are in a pretty dire place, but that we have been able to really keep action going, and to be, for the federal government to continue to support the work of cities and states to continue that progress, that it's integral to reducing our emissions, to support city action. So we've seen an incredible willingness and proactive approach to engage with cities in the United States and abroad to really help fuel our actions and partner, which has been an incredible opportunity and a real show of authentic partnership.
That's nice, thank you. And I want to remind everyone, we have 16 participants. I'm delighted by the great turnout. Please do feel free to put a question to Lauren using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. All questions are welcome, and I want you to feel, everyone, that this is your time to have a dialogue with Lauren while she's able to be with us here from Los Angeles. I'll go to the next question and look forward to the Q&A button popping away here. So I was going to ask you, we've just been through a global pandemic, which of course has impacted everyone in one way or another. How has that affected your work, Lauren? Have you seen any impact from that?
Yeah, it's been a really I mean, it's been a really tough time for everybody, and I really hope that everyone's zooming in. Thanks for getting on another Zoom call. And, I really hope that folks have been able to stay resilient and healthy and friends and family during this time, because it's been trying for as actually been to see how LA as a city can really step up and reinforcing and demonstrating, I think, to the world how LA can step up way beyond its quote unquote responsibilities within its charter, the infrastructure that we've set up to manage a city. We've had to go beyond sort of the city's roles and responsibilities in order to just meet the emergency needs. We don't have a health department. We don't have those social services. Those are the county of Los Angeles is in charge of those on behalf of the 88 cities within the county. Of course, LA City being the largest of those cities, but that's typically the way it works in terms of, particularly as it relates to health and social services. But we sort of threw that, and the mayor really was the one to throw that playbook out. And thankfully, we have a very collaborative relationship with the county such that we could do it in a way that was very cooperative. But, we were, as a city, standing up the first mass testing sites that became the mass vaccination sites. We were the ones who were really mobilizing the PPE acquisitions on behalf of the region. My team was fanned out immediately to do tons of things in the Emergency Operations Center, the Business Operations Center, trying to procure PPE and other equipment, as well as just operating phone lines, translation services. I mean, that's what we were all doing during that time. We've also been able to, from a sustainability standpoint, look at how we've can example, when people but we shifted around some of our plans for sustainability actions within the public right of way. So we're able to stripe significantly more bike lanes and provide bike lane infrastructure than we've been able to do in any single year in recent memory, because we've taken advantage of not having to be super disruptive to our streets and getting in there while we can. Same thing with closing down major streets that would otherwise only be closed down for the evening time, the night times, and on Wilshire Boulevard, being able to close down Wilshire for a few days rather than a few hours over weeks, to probably speed up the opening of a transit stop by 6 to 9 months. So really being able to take advantage of those moments to continue the work on behalf of the people. We also are really proud of, and we're seeing cities around the world really do this. And part of what we've been learning from cities around the world is implement, programs that are helping people think about the public right of way as something other than for cars. And that's obviously a really big challenge for a city like Los Angeles, where people are very car dependent and some people don't like when we try to give room on the street for other purposes than cars. But that really has changed when people were in need of open space to recreate, when parks were closed, when beaches were closed. And we created the Slow Streets program, which has blossomed to 60 miles of streets around the city where cars are guests. But really they're blocked off for, local traffic are guests, but they're really blocked off for people traffic. And creating programs where restaurants, we wanted them to be able to reopen in safe ways. And so creating expedited permitting for our al fresco program, so that sidewalks, parking spaces, parking lots could be quickly adapted, and providing funding to quickly adapt those spaces for eating. And, you know, that has really started to change people's opinions of how to use our public right of way, our open streets. And we're really hoping to take advantage of some of that momentum for more of our mobility priorities that are, you know, there for us to reduce traffic, reduce emissions, reduce air pollution, and increase people's, you know, opportunity for high quality mobility.
Good. Sounds very exciting. Thank you. We do have a question, thanks to WCEE's Vice President, Hannah Vizcarra, in the Q&A. Can you see that, Lauren, or would you prefer that I read it?
I can see it here. So much changing happening at the federal level, the amount of support for localities through infrastructure spending. And it is remaining uncertain. How is LA engaging with efforts to encourage bold action at the federal level and incorporating that uncertainty to its planning? Well, one thing is the mayor is testifying tomorrow before the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis on climate resilience and opportunities for investment through the AJP and other things, on infrastructure that provides multiple benefits, including climate resilience. So tune in. It's at, I guess, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, so 9:30 a.m. Pacific for us. So he'll be there with other amazing witnesses, with Mayor Bottoms of Atlanta, Keisha Bottoms of Atlanta, with Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway of Madison, Wisconsin. They're amazing women with so much to say about both the climate threats in their cities and opportunities for investment. But we also saw that, you know, the stimulus questions over the last, you know, 6 months or so, that provided a lot of uncertainty. But honestly, once those investment dollars and stimulus, you know, kind of emergency rescue dollars were coming into the city, it really has made a huge difference for us to be able to continue operations of normal services and kind of, in some cases, enhanced services. But we were really running at an unprecedented unprecedented budget challenges in terms of really the huge deficit that we were experiencing, where we had scraped away all of our reserves, borrowed from every department, stole from every special fee that we legally could, and to be able to just replenish baseline was something that we thought we'd be nowhere near. And thanks to the ARP, the American Rescue Plan, you know, the city was able to, we didn't get much over and above, but we were able to replenish the whole. And it was a $1.3 billion allocation to the city of Los Angeles. And that alone was able to plug our gap, which is amazing. But to give you a sense of how deep our hole has been, and the potential impact on services, you know, we've had to experience, you know, the incentivizing of early retirements. So, you know, departments were being decimated in terms of budgets and people. So it's really been, you know, hiring freezes, everything. And this is just not LA. This is every city in the country really has been experiencing this type of challenge. And so the work of the federal government has been, and the mayor will be the first to say this, I mean, absolute savior to basic services. And we've channeled a lot of the resources into additional efforts around racial and economic justice. The mayor just, you know, announced and passed the final city budget, which has a major justice budget component associated with it. Programs geared toward racial and economic justice, youth support that we've never been able to develop before, and some really exciting and really important efforts around homelessness, that, you know, a guaranteed basic income pilot for the city, really to look at how, you know, how can we demonstrate the positive impact that guaranteed basic income can have on communities and the payback. So we're looking to achieve over the next year. So some really incredible things that federal support has afforded us to that question. And of course, the AJP being the next kind of once in a lifetime opportunity for major investments that have long lasting benefits. We think about them through in the eyes of infrastructure as well. In LA's Green New Deal, we are focused, and our organizing principles, in addition to equity, is really through a zero carbon grid, zero carbon buildings, zero carbon transportation, zero waste, and zero wasted water. So all of those are ripe for AJP investments, and I'm happy to talk further into any of those specific pillars, but those are the 5 zeros that we see significant opportunity for.
It's an exciting plan. Thank you. And once again, I want to encourage everyone, please do provide your questions. I'm sure Lauren would be thrilled to hear from you and to answer them. So feel free to just pop them into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. I will go with another question for you, Lauren. You've worked for some very interesting public servants, Governor Schwarzenegger in Sacramento, Mayor Garcetti, as we've talked about, in the city of Los Angeles. I suspect they're very distinct personalities, and yet you were working on very similar issues for each of them. Can you talk a little bit about those two experiences and maybe compare and contrast?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I've been so lucky in my career to be able to work for individual leaders and the ecosystems that they've created, who really, I think that a common principle that makes it so fortunate is really about thinking big and thinking as a visionary, and recognizing the balance, but not that there's a tension, but the complementarity of focusing on, the work, the responsibility and work that you have to your constituents, but understanding also the role that we have in the bigger picture and being able to influence broader than our borders. And that is true for Governor Schwarzenegger. That was true for Governor Brown, who came after him. That's true for Mayor Garcetti. That's been true in so many places, because especially when it comes to climate, there really is this, effective leaders, I think, ought to recognize that there's important and critical services and opportunities and programs to bring to the immediate people that you serve, and that you can do that because it's the people that you serve. But in so doing, to raise the bar, to push others through partnership, because action on climate change is needed, as we know, globally in order to be successful. In order for my child, our children, to have health and safe lives to grow up in, it matters what's happening in other parts of the world. And so taking that responsibility in a really comprehensive way as a leader, I think, is what has set these leaders apart and made them really successful.
Thank you. Thank you. Great answer. Thanks. Thanks very much. We do have another question that's come in from a longtime WCEE member who's now in Boulder, Colorado, and is interested in hearing more about the 5 zeros.
Sure. Thank you, Heidi. So essentially, these 5 zeros underpin LA's Green New Deal in terms of our greenhouse gas reduction pathway to carbon neutrality and our investments and our our interim milestones. So a zero carbon grid is now much more straightforward. We had goals in LA's Green New Deal of an 80% renewable energy by 2036. And what's really exciting and I think emblematic of the mayor's approach is that he's always looking to review and accelerate goals. And so when we work with partners, we say, okay, this is where we can be today, but they know that is, the fight isn't over. The efforts to accelerate action are not over. We don't just sort of say, okay, done and dusted, let's move on to the next thing. And so almost every year that I have been in Los Angeles, we have upped our renewable energy goals. And so now we're at, as I said, we have been able to show and understand how we can achieve a zero carbon grid by 2035, which puts us at actually about 97% zero carbon by 2030. So really, really incredible accelerations. When we get into zero carbon transportation, we're really looking at the balance between electrification or zero carbon transportation, but also getting people out of cars. And so, we've set goals. This is all on-road transportation of all kinds. So, the passenger, light duty fleet, medium and heavy duty, buses, trucks, everything. So we're looking at the freight sector, urban delivery. We're about to, it's in the process, and City Council will be the first city to implement zero emission curbside delivery zones, where if you look at the things that we have in our power as a city, we have access to the curb. And that's meaningful for delivery companies, for the Amazons and the IKEAs and the DHLs. It's very material how easy and quick it is for them to get in and out of a delivery, a drop-off, right? Or a pickup. And so we're creating and the first to create these zones in certain parts of the city with an equity lens. So combining where our disadvantaged communities are with high, high freight activity, and saying, this is reserved for zero emission delivery trucks. And if you're not one, you can't access the curb here. So that's getting underway. We're looking at all kinds of unique levers that we have as a city, where maybe there's some things we can't do, but there's a lot of things that we actually really can do that are maybe soft policies that make a really big difference from a business model. So again, looking at interesting things for the zero emissions of our vehicles, as well as getting people out of their cars. Our transit, infrastructure projects, the largest to build out 15 transit lines, light rail, and our major transit system, bus only lanes, all these things. This is the largest infrastructure investment in the history of the country ×2 is undergoing and remaking the transit system for the city of Los Angeles. And that's what we're, knee deep in right now. But also looking at first mile, last mile. I mean, a number of things that we're doing to be able to help people get out of their cars, make it more, make it easier and higher quality opportunities for walking and biking. So all of those things together really make our zero carbon transportation goal. Just to note, the Port of Los Angeles is also a huge lever of ours. So we have DWP on the grid side, but the Port of Los Angeles in San Pedro is also a proprietary department of the city of Los Angeles, something I don't think I even realized growing up here. And so, the mayor appoints the general manager of the port, the largest port complex in the Western Hemisphere. 40% of the goods that come through the United States come through this port complex, which is together, it's a complex with the Long Beach port. So it is a huge economic driver for the country, warranting lots of zero carbon investment, we like to say to the federal government. But it's a pollution center because of ships and trucks and rail coming all in and around those communities. So it's a huge area of focus for us on the transportation side. And I can certainly talk a little bit more about what we're doing at the port. Buildings, very exciting, going way beyond energy efficiency and really looking at the full decarbonization of the building stock. Buildings are actually our largest source of emissions in Los Angeles. People might think it's the transportation sector is actually the emissions from electricity and gas use in our buildings. And I mean, of course, transportation is the largest source of air pollution, but in terms of greenhouse gas profile, it's our buildings. And it's about half electricity and gas. And we know electricity is getting cleaner. We don't have that opportunity right now with the gas system. And so we really do have to look at opportunities to transfer out of fossil fuel use in our buildings. This is something that we're working on with cities around the state, very bullish, and around the country and beyond. So really exciting work there. Zero waste, very exciting to be talking about a more circular economy, looking at, again, we run the waste and recycling systems, the system in LA. And so how are we incentivizing recycling? How are we creating markets for recyclable goods? One example is since we also pave our streets, we've been piloting pavement that is a type of asphalt that's made from recycled plastic. And so we're looking at all these opportunities for us to push innovation by being our own, economies of scale as a large city. And I would say zero wasted water is probably also an area where LA can really demonstrate a significant amount of unique and aggressive action. And a lot of that was coming out of the historic drought that we faced from the 2013 to really 2017 timeframe. This was part of what defined the mayor's first term, was the drought. And we are completely remaking the water system of Los Angeles. The water system was built on big infrastructure imports from hundreds of miles away, from large reservoirs that are subject to, dwindling resources. And we're really looking at how do we reduce our reliance on imports and really make ourselves a system that is based on local water resources. And we do that through our groundwater basins, stormwater capture, and water recycling. We're not going to import water, use it once, and send it to the ocean. We're going to have zero wasted water, where we're not sending any water to the ocean. And we're building our recycled water systems in real time right now. Some of the largest systems in the country to recycle our water for beneficial reuse. And that's one of the most exciting in terms of the remaking of something that is so defining for the city of Los Angeles, the incredible amount of job opportunities that we have in everything I just talked about, in remaking the grid, in retooling our buildings, in remaking the water system. This is a Renaissance opportunity. Climate action is a true Renaissance opportunity for not just LA, but we think that it's emblematic of every community in the country and in the world.
That was very informative. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lauren. Very, very interesting to hear what you're doing. And of course, so very important as we read about the California drought situation going on literally right now. Please, this is one more time saying, if you have any questions, now would be a great time to put them into the question and answer at the bottom of your screen. Just punch on that button and feel free to fire off any questions for Lauren. While we're waiting for more questions to come in from our participants, I'm going to ask you another question. This is a very interesting time for the city of Los Angeles. Mayor Garcetti was reelected in 2017 with 81% of the vote, which is pretty amazing in today's world. And he's under active consideration for U.S. Ambassador to India. Can you talk a little bit about the mayor's role in all the work that you've described so far? And if he were to venture off into a new position, what impact do you think that would have on the current work that you're doing?
Sure. So, obviously I can't comment on what may or may not be happening, with regard to the administration, just because I don't know. And, we read the news and frankly, he reads the news just like everybody else. And it's definitely remained to be seen, and just one foot in front of the other. The mayor is extraordinarily committed to his work. And to your question of what has been his role, I mean, it has been, driven by him personally. And that's one of the things that, drove me to come here, is seeing how much this work that I've been describing is really coming from him personally, from his heart, from his brain, that he knows it's the right thing to do. It's the thing that's best for the city to do. And that it requires taking chances and taking risks and getting out there, things that may not be very comfortable for everyone, in the city, but that we ultimately have to do it, and the city will be better off. And really building a constituency for this type of action, whether that's ending oil drilling in the city of Los Angeles, something that has plagued this city. The city was built on oil, but we know this oil is not our future. And really undoing the connection to that industry, which is having a huge impact on communities in real time, is an area that, you know, he knows is super important to lean in on. And it's coming from him. It's also coming from him listening to communities and understanding what the needs are of LA's most vulnerable communities. So that's true of our work on renewable energy. That's true of our work on, you know, oil and gas in the city. That's true of our work on homelessness. It is incredibly, he is inextricably linked to all of these efforts. But that being said, were he not to be here, one of the things that I think is also really important to how he has managed this work is it has become part of the identity of Los Angeles and the identity of the implementing departments within Los Angeles. One of the first things he did when the Sustainable City Plan was the first one was released in 2015, which is when I joined the city, was direct every city department, the head of every city department, to appoint a departmental chief sustainability officer. So I kind of have an army of CSOs in every city department. I mean, we're talking every city department, not just the ones you think of like DWP or sanitation or Department of Transportation. You know, we're talking about the library, the zoo, the police department, the fire department, of course, the housing department, our street services, every single department and bureau come together. We come together in a monthly meeting that we've never missed in the 6 years that I have been here. Our departmental CSOs every month to educate ourselves on what's going on in the city, to get updates and to collaborate. And truly some of the initiatives that I've been talking about, like Cool Pavement, for example, has come out of interdepartmental collaboration happening in these meetings, where I'll just give you a quick example. One of the early examples actually was we know that extreme heat is a huge issue for Los Angeles in the face of climate change. And we know that it's a real equity issue as well, because areas that are facing the urban heat island effect, which is localized hotspots due to darker ground cover and less shading, are disproportionately impacting disadvantaged communities, poorer communities, communities of color who don't have as much green space, tree cover, more concrete. And we wanted to innovate on this and try to figure out how to reduce the urban heat island effect in these communities. And so we charged the Bureau of Street Services, Streets LA, to start working on how do we use our streets as a solutions provider, as opposed to a contributor, which they are, to the urban heat island effect. And so our departmental CSO got up and said, okay, we've been working with a couple companies who have potentially cool pavement solutions that we want to try, but we can't try them on the street yet because they need to be tested for vehicle safety and skid tests and reflectivity tests, all these things. So I need a parking lot. I need a space where I can test this. And our departmental CSO for the Recreation and Parks Department said, well, out in the valley, we have a huge parking lot. It's super hot. It's super dark. Like, why don't we try it there? And that would have never happened. It just would have never happened if they hadn't had that opportunity to be in the same room together. And thus was born the Cool Pavement program, which has been adopted by multiple cities around the world. And is now in multiple parts on streets in LA. Phoenix, to my despair, has vastly outdone LA in terms of implementing cool streets that they've learned from LA, but it's really making waves around the world. I get asked by cities and by media from around the world to talk about and understand cool pavements better. That's just one small example of how this work is really getting integrated and part of the identity and the fabric of the city.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. So you, Lauren, have a unique background. I mean, you've had prior experience here in Washington, D.C. With your consulting work at Lighthouse Consulting, but also working at the British Embassy here on these issues. Obviously, we talked about your state experience, and of course, now you're in local government. Can you talk about how all those different experiences are coming together in the work that you're doing today and how that's benefiting what your wonderful contributions are?
Yeah, thank you. When I was one of those, people who knew what I wanted to work on in college right away. And, early, I'm going to declare my major and work on climate change. And, one of those people who just started then and kept going. And I will say that, my early views and understandings of how to address these issues, I really felt, this is an international issue. We have to attack this at the international level. And so I really had an amazing, and so I was super fortunate, amazing opportunity to join the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. And, very thankful to a mentor from from grad school, who also was a longtime Washingtonian who understood Washington and helped connect me. So just lesson for folks on, not sure where people are in their careers right now who are tuning in, but mentors are incredibly important and influential, and taking advantage of your networks, both from your academic life and of course your professional life, is really pivotal, and has been, at least for me, to advance my career. And so not only is it just a lesson learned about career advancement, but also about how I want to use the opportunities I have in my career now for young people. But anyway, got connected to the British Embassy, not really understanding what they did and how that was going to, be the thing I wanted to work on, but really an incredible opportunity to work on international climate change policy and diplomacy. And I was there for 4.5 years, really exposed to incredible leaders and thinking about policy and partnership in a very broad way. So yes, at the international scale, but also how leaders at the national level can work with leaders at a subnational level, even from another country. So, Prime Minister Blair reaching out and developing relationships with Governor Schwarzenegger or other governors throughout the United States during a time where there was a bit of a vacuum in climate policy at the federal level. And then moving on to the state, where Governor Schwarzenegger and Governor Brown really understood the outsized influence that California can have globally. And so I will say what's been really cool is to see the evolution of at least my experience and my belief of how to have a big impact. I did not think that going down to the local level was where to have a big impact, but I kept going more local in every step of my career, and really feel like there's a sweet spot here. But I do believe that you can have an incredible impact in any level of government or service, because a lesson learned is you don't have to abandon work at the international level if you go to work for a city, or the local level if you go to work for the state. That kind of partnership and an understanding of the levers that can be pressed by each of those different jurisdictions when we are working together and coordinating that has been so gratifying to be able to build on that in every next step.
That's a wonderful answer, and congratulations to you on a very, very successful career. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share with everybody in WCEE?
Well, I would just, for this type of group where it's, women lifting up women and supporting women in their careers, when women get together and put their heads together, we can get a lot done. And we can think really creatively and be willing to say and do things that maybe others aren't willing to say and do, especially when we're in a safe space together. And so I just really want to encourage everyone here to think of WCEE and honorary for me out in California. to think of this venue as a safe space for solutions and for providing support for everyone to be successful in your endeavors, in your part of your career, because one member's success really can help another member's success. And I just really want to encourage you, everyone, you get what you put in when you're part of a network. And it's very gratifying to spend time getting to support and take advantage of a network, whether it's WCEE or anywhere else that you're a part of. You really get out of it what you put in. And so if it's observing and learning and attending, you know, that's great. And you will take things away from that. But also, if there's opportunities to take more of a leadership role, more of a proactive role, that will pay back as well in really gratifying, sort of professionally and personally gratifying ways. And so I just want to put that bug in people's minds as they move forward for today and beyond.
Thank you very much. You captured beautifully the spirit and the mission of WCEE and what we strive to do for our members. And it's just a delight to have you with us, Lauren. And thank you so much to Lauren for being with us from Los Angeles today. Thank you, everyone who dialed in today to be a part of today's executive exchange. And I wish you all a very, very happy rest of your day, a great summer, and please take care as we all go forward together. Thank you again, Lauren Faber O'Connor. Well done.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
day. Bye.